maybe your taste of nostalgia also has this bittersweetness of wondering if you could be transported back into your teenage self, what decisions would you have made differently that would end up affecting the rest of your adult life? I think we all made dumb decisions when we were younger and thought that we could live forever in the peak of our lives with no consequences. And as an adult, I've given myself grace for a lot of those bad choices. Because admittedly, I was still just a kid and I needed guidance and support through a lot of the chaotic parts of my life that kinda seemed cooler back then. But then all of these things became scary monsters with minds of their own by the time I became an adult and had to really deal. And when it comes to Tokyo Revengers, that's really an anime that's earned my respect over the past couple of years. Not just because of the huge hype train from Japan and Western anime audiences that totally acclaim its manga series, it's the way that Tokyo Revengers finally adopts this adult perspective to the chaotic realities of being a rebellious teenager. And in anime, teenagers always seem to be lacking in adult supervision, accountability, and actual consequences. Tokyo Revengers doesn't have the average reincarnation plot device, because our main character isn't being reincarnated into a new life. Instead, he's being transported back into his own past life, in a way that's more similar to time travel than it is to an alternative reality. And each time our main character wakes up, he's in the middle of his teenage gangster years, and the decisions that he makes with his adult mind and his teenage body actually does still affect the future. I feel like our main character is like that older brother that a lot of his friends really needed at this time, in order to really take revenge over their lives and put the future into perspective. So if you're ready for this recap and breakdown of Tokyo Revengers before the much anticipated new season, keep watching and like and subscribe, because I'm gonna be reacting to all of the episodes right here at Sistapunk Studios. So let me catch you up. This series starts off with your average 20-something-year-old Japanese stay-at-home bum. This guy, Takemichi, ends up finding out one day on the morning news that the one and only girlfriend he ever had back in middle school in his heyday has suddenly died in a car accident that's related to some gang affairs. But that was years ago, and Takemichi isn't a gangster anymore. Now Takemichi is just some old dude who works in a video store, and his past life is supposed to be something that he's gotten over, right? But Takemichi is definitely feeling a type of way now that he's a crappy adult living in a crappy apartment with a crappy job. Really, now Takemichi is more of a loser than he ever was. And he's already wondering what his life would be like if he lived differently when he was younger. Maybe even then his ex-girlfriend Hinata would still be alive. But it looks like it's too late for all of that, because this mofo gets hit by a train. And then as his life starts flashing behind his eyes, he wakes up in his blonde-haired, baggy-clothes teenage body. Back in time to the peak of his life 12 years ago in middle school. And it's not just his fashion taste that's aged poorly, but also a lot of his dumb adolescent decisions trying to get tough with these local school gangs. And I find it hilarious when Takemichi comes to terms with the fact that he's gonna have to get into fist fights again at his big age, which is ridiculous because it hurts. But back then there was this whole mentality of spirit and drive about being part of a crew and representing and owning your own turf. So that way everyone in your generation would know your name, and that way you'd have purpose and place in this city. But I don't even think Takemichi with his adult rationality can keep up with all of these fighting middle school students. And adult Takemichi in his teenage body sees in hindsight how they were way over their heads as kids, and that they were trying to impress their peers only to end up bullied and beat up, and most notably by the Tokyo Manji gang, where their actions started to have consequences that spelled out the rest of their lives. And this really affected who Takemichi became as an adult, after all of these memories of being abused as a lackey in this gang. And it led Takemichi down this road of feeling like a loser and barely keeping up with one job after another, always apologizing and trying to flee his past that doesn't seem so cool now that he's back in it. But Takemichi needs to understand that this isn't a dream about his shitty life. This is his life actually happening all over again. And the events that happen here with the Tokyo Manji gang leads to his girlfriend Hinata dying 12 years later. And Takemichi is realizing that these years are most important and formative for the rest of his life. The things that he says and does now will affect the future. Even down to chatting it up with his girlfriend's little brother, just to tell him all the values that he lacked when he was his age. And it's also at this point that Takemichi, on a whim, decides to warn his ex-girlfriend's little brother that Hinata is going to die in 12 years, whether he's going to believe it or not. And as crazy as it all all sounds, that also ends up affecting the future. So that Hinata's little brother, Naoto, actually ends up saving Takemichi from getting hit by that train. Naoto is the first to know and believe that Takemichi can time travel, and he personally chooses to become a police officer in the future just so he can break some rules and really help Takemichi find out how to stop his sister from dying in the past. In a weird way, this whole situation is even closer to Naoto as Hinata's little brother, even more than it is to Takemichi, who's suddenly traveling to the past, because it gives him the possibility to actually change something horrific that probably shouldn't happen and that Hinata didn't deserve. Even though Takemichi's first attempt wasn't enough to keep Hinata from getting killed by whoever is running the Tokyo Manji gang at this point, Takemichi now knows that he can change the past whenever he shakes hands with Naoto. And this transports Takemichi's consciousness into his teenage body, while his body in the future kinda goes under this deep sleep. It's definitely giving Steins Gate vibes with the time leaps and multiple alternate timelines that kind of mesh into one while we're running through space and time trying to keep one girl from dying. But if Takemichi and Naoto can really work together, maybe they can save Hinata. And find out how this middle school gang turned into this murderous, massive crime organization. But in order to find out this hierarchy that stems from these middle school brawls, Takemichi can't run away anymore and he has to fight through the ranks. And that goes straight to the commander, Mikey, who is this little shorty blondie with flip-flops. And Mikey has this weirdly serene apathy, but this unforeseen strength and brutality. And he makes these pompadour bullies look like hood rats in a Lions game. But somewhere in that dead gaze, Mikey is that cool kid that everyone looks up to. And Mikey ends up strangely taking a liking to Takemichi's newfound resolve when he interacts with him with his new mindset in his past. Even though the Tokyo Manji gang is supposed to turn into this murderous, drug-dealing, hitman, human trafficking, mobster organization, Mikey at this age still has a code of value and honor towards all of his friends. And Mikey ends up respecting the strength that Takemichi has even though he knows that he's weak. And it's all because he wants to protect those that he really cares for. That ends up reminding Mikey of his own older brother who passed away, but we'll get into that backstory later on in the video. Takemichi befriending this gang leader, Mikey, ends up really changing the course of his life and the events that happened to his friends too. Even if it ends up making the future way more complicated. At first, the mission is simple. We're trying to stop Mikey and this other major criminal gang leader, Kisaki, from meeting up and triggering Hinata's death in the future. But now, even Takemichi's closest friends from the past are involved with the Tokyo Manji gang, with Takemichi's closest friend, Akun, becoming an upper echelon delinquent in the gang. Even though Akun is at the top of the pyramid, he's living as a soldier to Kisaki and is filled with guilt and shame. And Takemichi does try to reach out to Akun in the present, knowing that maybe he still has this connection to his old friends and that they all kind of stayed the same and have this same bond even if they haven't spoken in years. But Takemichi ends up finding this untouchable gang lord on top of this lavish pyramid of sin. And Akun's face seems so dark and lifeless and gaunt from all the burdens that he has to carry. And in comparison, Takemichi seems to have so much more light and hope in him. But sadly, in this timeline, Akun reveals that it was actually him who pushed Takemichi into the train tracks to begin with, and was intentionally trying to kill him before beginning this whole time leap journey. And at this point, even Mikey has become distant and corrupted because lives have been lost in the years since, leaving even his best friend Draken dead after years, which corrupted his mindset. Draken was like the cool-headed and reliable yin to Mikey's mini-sized, silently violent yang. And Draken ends up understanding Mikey better than anyone, especially since they've been friends since way before middle school and were both some of the strongest of their generation. It would be impossible to even imagine them seriously feuding because their friendship is kind of freaking adorable too. Together, Mikey and Draken were not only feared by their peers, but also genuinely respected with a deep heart and appreciation. Because when some shit happens to anyone in the Tokyo Manji gang or their friends or family, they all get together to crush their enemies and defend their brothers. and Draken was pretty much Mikey's sense of consciousness after the death of his brother. And Draken really held himself accountable for being a part of this delinquent culture that still admittedly affects innocent people even when it seems like just wild fun. So it makes sense if Mikey would become chaotic after that bond was broken with Draken's death. But then it's further sullied by the inexplicable evil that is Kisaki. I can't even begin on how much I hate this guy in every single timeline, because Kisaki ends up striking fear even in Akun, driving him to the point of breaking down in front of Takemichi. And what would be the final moments before Akun ends up taking his own life in this timeline. Maybe if Takemichi can really travel through time, maybe he can create a new reality that doesn't only save his girlfriend Hinata, but maybe also saves Mikey and Draken, and maybe even prevents Akun from not wanting to live in this reality anymore. Takemichi now has a duty to use his power to save everyone and make them believe in a future where they can live to fulfill their dreams as adults. But honestly, even with an adult's mind, Takemichi is kind of an idiot with figuring out the right timing and actions, because all of these really complex gang politics can turn into a 100-man deep all-night brawl with people's lives on the line. Takemichi really starts to understand that he has to be stronger and tougher in the past and in the future if he really wants to have any kind of change. But so far, let's go through Takemichi's accomplishments. He stopped Draken from dying in the past, he ended up keeping the Tokyo Manchi gang together, and he's hopefully trying to keep Mikey from being corrupted by Kisaki, which should then keep Akun from taking his own life, and keep Hinata from getting involved in that whole car crash in the first place. And when Takemichi finally has a chance in the present to face Hinata again sincerely while she's still alive, we see how they're both still desperate to really find closure with all of these lingering feelings after years from their breakup. But this timeline ends up catching up with them, and Takemichi ends up having to try to save Hinata one more time, to the point of trying to pull her out of the burning car crash that takes her life. And Takemichi feels so helpless that he's not even able to save Hinata in the future right at the very moment where she's about to be extinguished from this world. All he's able to do is share this moment with Hinata where they're able to finally admit that they have always loved each other. If Takemichi really wants to save Hinata, he's gonna have to step into the bad side. And Takemichi has to climb the ranks of the Tokyo Manchi gang in order to really affect the direction of events. At this point, Takemichi doesn't only want to save the lives of people who he cares about, but he also wants to take revenge on his own life and create a better future for himself where he's not a helpless loser. But he's now instigated a whole new flurry of events through his actions in the past that are led by this horribly tattooed maniacal leader named Hanma, who reveals himself as the real trigger to Hinata's death. It turns out that Hanma is working with Kisaki, who's still pulling all of the puppet strings to make other people do his dirty work. And that's how Akun ends up still in the driver's seat in that very car crash that happens before Takemichi's eyes, killing his best friend and his girlfriend in the future once again. Takemichi is fated to watch everyone that he loves die in his arms, hopes and dreams be damned. But if Takemichi really wants to find the root as to why all of this happened, he has to navigate through all of the bad blood and history of the Tokyo Manchi gang that spans over years and generations, really. There was a time when Draken and Mikey and the original founders just saw this gang as a fun, carefree way to spend time with their best friends, where every night felt like a party on their motorbikes, and they could scruff up whatever douchebags were prowling the streets. But all that changed when Mikey's brother died. And while trying to commit a very poorly thought out robbery, Baki and Kazutora end up freaking out when they're caught and end up attacking the person who found them, but that person ends up being Mikey's older brother. And this unchangeable, fatal moment has effects years into the future. Really, this is the spark that still burns with fury in Mikey's heart. Even though he tries to act like he's gotten over it, this triggers the string of deadly fights that ends up breaking the Tokyo Manchi gang apart, creating enough cracks for messed up individuals like Kisaki to get their grubby little fingers in and destroy people's lives forever. And Kisaki really knows how to pick at people's weak spots spots and act innocent, especially when it comes to Mikey's sensitivity about his brother's death and the founding of the Tokyo Manji Gang. Baki and Kazutora are actually founding members of the Tokyo Manji Gang who end up becoming enemies and are really perfect examples about how their little teenage brains can't even really handle the trauma of all of these events, and how their actions lead to the murder of someone who they cared about. It reminds me again that despite them being a super tough citywide biker gang, they're really still just kids and they'll make stupid decisions just like kids will. They just lack the guidance and support of anyone who really cares for them, to remind them to respect other people's lives and take accountability for their fucked shit. Kinda in a way that an older brother would. And seeing Takemichi run around trying to get them to not kill each other or accidentally kill themselves really shows the difference in maturity and awareness of consequence. And because they're all kids who don't really get that, it really reminds me to give them more grace. Because they deserve more than living fast and dying young just to become martyrs, or only staying alive long enough to see themselves become villains. And I also wonder what I'd say to my teenage self or my peers 12 years ago, and if lives and friendships could have been saved by that advice. But the only way that Takemichi will really have the power to save the future with all of these massive moving parts is if he climbs to the top of the Tokyo Manji Gang himself and destroys it from the inside. But that's definitely easier said than done with the way that the last season of Tokyo Revengers ended. After all of Takemichi's hard work in the past, it actually earned him the respect and title of being the first division leader of the Tokyo Manji Gang. And by the time Takemichi returns to the future, it definitely looks like the grass is greener on the other side, as well as his lifestyle. Because finally, Takemichi is a winner in his present tense. And he's all decked out with jewels and a fancy crib and a posse of devoted followers. Even if his personality doesn't fit the whole OG top dog mobster crew vibe, almost all of the original members of the gang are still gathered together years later, waiting for Mikey to join them. But this also includes some unwelcome guests from a whole new generation of gangsters, and of course, the sinister Kisaki. Some things about the old crew never changes in good ways and in the worst ways, because Kisaki is still hell-bent on destroying the Tokyo Manji Gang and Takemichi, which proves that after over a decade, this blood still runs bad. And in the last moments of the last episode of Tokyo Revengers, it doesn't really seem like we're going to have any more chances at changing the past or even another chance at the future. Because Kisaki is already holding a gun right up against Takemichi's head, ready to take him out. And I don't think Takemichi's time leap abilities are going to be enough to even save his own life this time. And it's so sad seeing how disheartened Takemichi feels, knowing that there's no way to change his life for the better without doing something drastic. And I have no idea what to expect for this new season of Tokyo Revengers, and how Takemichi will survive not only for himself, but also to go back in the past and continue trying to save his friends, and also save the Tokyo Manji Gang from the internal strife caused by Kisaki. And hopefully all of this can happen without Takemichi breaking his own sense of self along the way. If you like this recap and you want to watch with me this season, I'll be reacting to every episode of Tokyo Revengers. So make sure you like and subscribe for more anime reviews, vlogs, and music from my punk family. You can find me on my socials, links in the description. Thanks so much for watching, y'all. Peace.
Player 1, player 2, show your ass what players do. Up